Okay. Hey, there we are. Okay. You hear me pretty good there?
Yeah. How about you?
Oh, yeah. I hear you pretty good.
All right. Sweet.
So I'm talking right into the microphone filter. So
Yeah, I got a
hopefully
pop filter on. Hopefully that'll help. I don't know. I pop a lot.
Pop music
Oh,
filter.
man.
Yeah.
Pop music. That's one of my favorite songs of all time.
I wonder why they don't make avant-garde or like punk rock filters. You know, they only have the
Right.
the pop ones.
Yeah.
You know, what about us who we like? You know, we don't like the top.
Well, I guess
40
that's
filters.
part of the sound, right? You know, if you made it sound good,
Exactly.
it would become pop.
Exactly. Oh, so folks. I guess I should. We should introduce ourselves again.
Since they've forgotten.
Exactly. Oh boy, I'm Dan,
And I'm Erik.
and folks, you probably recognize that we've been gone for 2 weeks, and that's because I was sick. I think that I had the COVID. Not 100% sure, but chances are that was what was going on. My dad, who I live with, he got diagnosed with it. So the last 2 weeks have been particularly fun. Oh, man. Let me tell you, it's good to be back, though.
Yeah. I'm glad you're back. I'm glad you're feeling better.
Yeah, it was rough, let me tell you.
Yeah.
But, you know, we fly by. We just try and... you know, make it through the hard times in life. Mm-hmm. That's really all you can do.
You got it. That's about it.
That's really it.
Because if you don't make it through, then you don't make it through.
That's bad.
Yeah.
It's really, really bad when that happens.
It's about as bad as it gets, I guess. I mean, you know, it's up there.
I mean, I guess you don't really know how bad
That's
it is.
true.
You know?
Yeah.
But it seems like it would be bad.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah, we got some music to talk about again.
Yeah.
We made this our list for 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. Yeah. I had to go back and listen to some of the records a little bit today to refresh my memory. So.
Yeah, I had to go back and listen to everything today, actually. Even my picks. I forgot what my picks sounded like.
Yeah. Yeah, me too.
So
sweet. So what else has been going on? Or is that's it? You've just been recovering.
Well,
sick and recovering.
Yeah, I mean, sick and recovering. Let's see. I read a lot of comics while I was sick. Mm-hmm. I have a whole bunch of comics that I bought and never read. Mm-hmm. And so I took this opportunity to do that.
Nice.
And so there's this series called Sonic Disruptors that was put out in the 80s from DC Comics. Mm-hmm. And it was supposed to be a 12-issue miniseries, but it only lasted 7 issues because sales were so poor that they discontinued it after issue 7 on a cliffhanger.
Whoa.
That's how bad it was. So like nobody knows what happens, you know, after issue 7. But it's one of the DC Comics was actually putting out some kind of weird, gnarly like series back in the 80s. I mean, I guess it kind of makes sense. They had the Vertigo Comics imprint and stuff like that. But, yeah, it was Sonic Disruptors. So basically, let me see if I can recall the basic plot. So there's this group of, like, terrorists, or they're deemed terrorists by the United States. And what it is it's they're doing a pirate radio station from space, basically.
From space.
Which is from space, yes. And then like they're running this like on top of that, it's kind of like a front for like a drug operation or something.
It sounds
it's really
like a really fun thing to try to do.
Yeah, it really does. But they also like it's really weird too because they're rock and rollers. So like it there's a lot of like almost like I mean I think this series was out in like 87, 88 and like so like the president is like this commie hating, like just, complete like, macho dude, which it's like you're like I'm reading this and I'm like, wow, there's a lot of stuff that happened in 87 in this universe that it can almost be like similar to like, America now. It's really, really interesting.
So are the drug dealing pirate radio guys, are they the heroes?
Well, I mean, yeah, I guess, I mean, yeah, there really are no heroes in this book, I don't think. It's kind of more like everybody's doing something bad.
Oh, nice.
But then like it depends on like who you would I mean if you think that like people who are like into rock music and who are playing like rock and roll music that old people hate that are in power.
Yeah.
Then those are your heroes.
Right.
But if you think that rock music is bad and that America should go back to, what it was or whatever, this idea of what it was, because that's an idea,
right?
Then your heroes are the people that are in the White House. I mean, it just depends on.
This is just written for everyone. Everyone would love this.
It kind of, well, it was apparently written for no one because they canceled it after issue 7.
Everyone was like, I just don't know if I believe, if I agree with this president guy or these drug dealing rock and rollers. I just don't.
Right. And then the other thing about it too is this was like in 87. And so the comic books industry was still pretty like tame.
Yeah.
I mean, there wasn't, like Image Comics didn't exist
right.
yet. I mean, there were underground comics that were vile. I mean, even like the first Ninja Turtles comic
was pretty adult. Yeah, right.
Yeah, pretty adult. But like DC wasn't really, I mean, I guess they did have the Dark Knight Returns by Frank Miller and the Vertigo. I think they put out Watchmen by that time, but like this was under just the DC, label.
Right.
And so I think maybe that had something to do with the poor sales. Like people still kind of wanted, like the people who were reading comic books in like 87 were like, still, they still wanted that sort of campy Superman, Batman type thing, So I don't know. Maybe it was just a series that was too, I guess, ahead of its time, or maybe it was just a really bad idea. I can't figure it out. I can't figure out like which one it was. Right. I can't figure out if it, like reading it, it's interesting that it was made in 87 and published by DC, but I can't figure out if it's good or bad.
Okay. Is the artwork cool or is it just like standard?
Yeah. The artwork is really cool. But see, here's the thing though. I'm a sucker for like vintage comic book art.
Yeah.
Like I love the look of like 50s Superman.
Oh, me
comics.
too. Yeah, for sure.
And
I like it much better than, I don't know, more like the 90s stuff that was a lot more, I don't know how to say it, fluid and moving and kind of all over the place, really solid, stark colors and things. Like I kind of like the muted, sterile newsprint look of the older comics, So
definitely. Yeah, and I like the colorfulness of it. It looked like a world that I wanted to live in.
Yeah. I'll have to check that out or borrow them from you or something.
Yeah, you can definitely borrow them from me. There's a couple of other, another really good series that was published around the same time from DC called Time Masters. That one was really good, and there was another one called The Outsiders. And it seems like that this period of time, DC was just kind of publishing these weird titles that kind of didn't really go anywhere, like in terms of sales. You know,
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe for all I know, they could have like revamped some of the stuff. I'm not really 100% sure.
Cool.
But so I read that. Ugh, excuse me. Still kind of having that lingering cough every now and again. But I don't know. Yeah, there's some other things that I bought like a while back, comic book wise. You ever heard of? Do you know who? Mike Allred is?
No, I don't think so.
He was an artist. He did this comic book called Madman back in the day, and he's got a really weird cartoony style. But he did this superhero series called The Atomics in the '90s. It's the art is cool, but the story really isn't.
I gotcha.
The story just really isn't that great. It's 90s comics. I mean, you kind of said it. 90s comics, you know, they're basically were just really, really good 90s comics and really, really bad 90s comics.
Yeah.
Didn't seem to be very much middle ground. So
yeah, and I only read, maybe about 15 comics in all of the 90s. So I'm sure I read a couple good ones and a couple bad ones. So
yeah, when I was like, at that time I was in middle school and I was collecting all the Image stuff because I thought everyone thought that stuff was gonna get their kids through college, and things like that. Like that stuff was gonna be. It's crazy looking back on like how everybody reacted to that too.
For sure.
I mean, like Rob Liefeld and Todd McFarlane and Eric Larson, they were like rock stars.
Yeah,
man.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's funny that because my understanding is that the same thing happened to the sports card industry as well. It was like everyone thought, because in the early 90s there was a huge market for these vintage things, they thought, well, if I buy them now and wait 40 years, these are going to be worth a ton of money. But they just overprinted everything. They just made so much of it that it's not rare. It was not rare on any level, and there was no resale value for any of it, So
yeah, not only was it not rare, but it was also, let's face it, a lot of those early Image books were just really bad.
Yeah.
Like a lot of them were just crap. They just kind of threw them together. I remember there was the whole thing about them not releasing books on time. Like, I remember that was a huge thing. And there were rumors that, like, a lot of the artists were, like, heroin addicts.
Oh, yeah. Nice.
And things like that, which might have been true.
I just saw a really good documentary about Todd McFarlane and that whole era of comics. I can't remember what it's called, though. Yeah, I'll try to remember, though, because it was really good. It was a newer documentary, so...
Yeah, there's quite a few of them. There's actually a documentary specifically about Image, the Image Revolution.
Yeah, that's the one I watched. That was good.
Is that the one you watched? Yep. Okay. Yeah, I love the fact that they all quit Marvel. They decided to quit Marvel, and then they marched over to DC.
Yeah.
Because they were like the hottest artists at the time. Literally, Marvel lost like their 6 hottest artists. Right. Like completely. Like they were the only artists that were selling books at Marvel at the time. And they all just decided to quit.
Yeah.
And then they went over to DC, and DC thought, oh, they're coming to DC. And they were like, nope, we're starting our own company.
Yeah.
I thought that was really cool.
Yeah. No, it was a really good one. Like I said, I don't collect comics, but more like through proximity and especially through our friend Sean, I was surrounded by that stuff, all the Spawn figures and everything. And it's funny because that whole, like, I would say that's probably one of the biggest scams that's ever been pulled on consumers in modern times, was this sort of collector's market in the 90s. Like, I watched it happen with Sean. He had, tons of Spawn figures in the boxes and Simpsons figures and stuff. And they were sold with the idea of leave these in the boxes and they'll be worth tons of money. And then they just weren't, you know?
No, yeah.
And so if you liked
totally.
them, you collected them because you liked them, awesome. You had a good collection. But if you collected them with any sort of like, I'm going to sell these for a bunch of money in the future, you got kind of screwed. So
yeah, it's really the same thing too with like Image. Well, Marvel jumped on the bandwagon too, but like you remember when they kept doing those like special covers, like the hologram covers and the alternate covers and all that stuff.
Yeah.
For the longest time, that was the hot craze, but
Yeah.
really it was just like a cool hologram cover, you know, surrounding a crappy book.
I just remember people like keeping the lids from their stupid soda pop at Burger King or some shit because some Darth Maul head was on it or something. I mean, it was ridiculous.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I mean, and for
Yeah.
years that went on, and it was just like, I don't know, maybe it's still that way, and I just don't see it. But yeah, people around me were like collecting such dumbass things, you know, and it was just like, I don't know. I don't know any millionaires, and so it obviously didn't work out for any of them. So I don't know.
No, yeah.
You know?
Yep.
But not
Absolutely.
that I can talk. I mean, I collect absolutely asinine things with no future value. So whatever, you know.
Yes. Oh, me too. Me too. Trust me. I'm the same exact way, Eric. 90s, the 90s were a strange time just overall. We should do an entire episode just talking about the 90s.
Okay.
Like, because the 90s was such a weird, don't you think the 90s were a weird time now?
Like looking back?
Yeah.
I do. I think they were, you know, the funny thing is I was a teenager during the 90s, and at the time I hated it. And for years I've hated the 90s. I thought it was just the worst time. And I think that's how things work. Whatever era you grew up in, you think is lame, and the other eras around it are cool, generally.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
But looking back now, it's kind of like, well, at least we were dumb. At least we like were naive, and like we bought into crap. Like people wore, you know, jeans that had like 20-inch around legs because, you know, other people wore them. And that was like, oh, I don't know. It was like a time you could just really pull off just about anything you wanted. And other people around you would be like, oh, that's pretty cool. And so that part of it I like. Looking back now, I like that. It was like there were a lot of things to be into, and there were a lot of people that also would be into it. You know, I felt like youth culture sort of came together a little bit.
Youth culture killed my dog.
Right. But, you know, I would also guess that nostalgia affects everyone similarly. And now people that grew up in the 60s look back and say, yeah, the 60s were awesome. The young people really came together. Like, you know, when you're in it, it sucks. And when you look back, it was pretty cool. I think that's how it works.
I'm even seeing that like every now and again. I'll just kind of like go on YouTube and I'll kind of look up like music videos from like the mid 2000s.
Yeah.
Because I remember there was a period of time where I was like, you know, I would just kind of like, for whatever reason, I'd watch like Fuse or Much Music.
Right.
In like the early to mid 2000s, and I would watch, you know, all the big emo videos and stuff of the time and whatnot. And sometimes I'll just kind of like, you know, go get on YouTube when I want to waste time and look that stuff up. And I'm seeing like kids, like, well, they're not kids now. They're like, it's weird to think that at the time, you know, a lot of the people that were experiencing that as teenagers in like 2005 or whatever, they're like approaching their 30s now, you know? And so I'm actually seeing like in a lot of these message boards on those types of videos, oh man, I miss high school. I miss back when MTV played music, But they're talking about like 2005.
Right. Yeah, and you're like, they didn't play music in 2005.
Yeah. Not like they did in 94
or shit,
anyway,
84. Like they only had 8 videos, and
yeah.
you just had to watch them on loop.
Yeah, that's true.
So many people became big time music stars only because MTV didn't have any other videos.
That's very true, and it's weird to think that it still blows my mind that the first video ever played was "Video Killed the Radio Star"
by the Buggles. That's actually super good record. I think it is.
What the hell very
is it called?
Good.
The Age of Plastic or something?
The Age...
something
like that, but I don't remember what
it's really good. It's a great new wave record.
Yes. I used to own it, actually. And it's a very... another really underrated new wave group, Wall of Voodoo.
Oh, yeah. Wall of Voodoo is awesome. For sure.
Oh, my gosh.
Stan Ridgway's voice
of the West
is so
album.
cool. And
it's
that sort of spaghetti western guitar stuff, and just the electronic drum sound. It's super great. Yeah.
Yeah, and his voice, you mentioned his voice. It sounds like it doesn't belong anywhere.
Yeah.
It has no business being in a new wave band.
No, but it's so if you've ever heard it once, you know it. As soon as you hear his voice sitting down in Tijuana, you're like, oh shit, there's Stan Ridgway. Yeah. Great voice.
It's amazing stuff, man. I couldn't believe it. Cause I've always heard Mexican radio, I remember that's one of those songs that my dad used to always think was hilarious. Cause it is.
Yeah. Their
hilarious.
Cover of Ring of Fire is sick.
Oh, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Yeah. Wall of Voodoo, man. There's so many new wave bands from the 80s that just, blow my mind for sure. Well, I guess that's a good segue into music, isn't it?
You can start if you want to. You can go straight into the one I assume you're talking about.
I don't even remember what was the last who went first 2 weeks ago?
I don't even remember. You can go first. You've been sick.
I don't either. Okay, you want me to go first? Okay. So I'm going to go ahead, and since I was actually going to start with a different one, but I think that I'm going to start with the one that I think you think I'm going to start with. And that's Dazzle Ship's Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark. Was I correct in assuming that?
Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark. Yeah, the record is Dazzle Ships. Yep.
Dazzle Ships. This is actually another one of Sean's records, actually. And I've heard Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark. I've heard that title. And I guess wasn't there a band called that?
That is the band.
Okay, that is the band.
Yep.
Well, so is Dazzle Ships the name
record.
of the...
Yep, you got it.
So Dazzle Ships is the name of the record. That's hilarious.
Yes.
So Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark is the name of the band, and Dazzle Ships is the name of the record.
Yeah.
That is hilarious. This whole time I thought Dazzle Ships was the name of the band.
Gotcha.
That is freaking hilarious. But don't you think Dazzle Ships sounds like a good band name?
I do, yeah. Yeah.
So Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark, Dazzle Ships.
Yeah. Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark. I'll let you talk, but their biggest hit that everyone in the world knows is If You Leave. If you remember that song. If you leave, don't look back.
Okay, is
it's
that
like a real big new wave hit.
It was on like a Breakfast Club or something.
It's that kind of song. I don't know if it was on that movie or not, but it's very much that kind of song. But they have a long history, and this record is part of it. So, yeah,
I'll have to look that up because that sounds like something I should know. I mean, I guess really I should have known that this was Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark was the name of the band. But
it's hard to tell from that cover, though. Absolutely.
It really is. And also, like, I swear that when I looked it up on the internet, it said Dazzle Ships was the name of the band, but I guess I was wrong. But anyway, Yeah, no, I don't really. I got to say that I didn't really do a lot of research on this record, but I listened to it several times. When I listened to it on record, I was just blown away at the just experimentation of it. It was just a really weird record. There's like these weird sort of like field recordings that they're using. And the first song is called Radio Prague. And it's just really this interesting, use of horns. And I would say it's more of like an intro to the record. But yeah, this is just a really cool, like electronic sort of new wave. At times it's almost pop, but I would say it's a little too experimental to really call it a pop record. Just overall, I was just really, really amazed by it. If you're really into like just sort of weird 80s sort of experimental new wave type stuff, this is the record for you.
Yeah.
You probably know a little bit more about this than me, Eric.
I'll talk about it if you don't care.
Sure, go right ahead.
So yeah,
no, go right ahead.
OMD has been around for a long, long time. When they first started, I would say it was really, really good electronic music. I wouldn't say it's like to the level of Joy Division or not Joy Division, but New Order. But it's in that vein. They have a song called Enola Gay, which is probably one of the most beloved sort of synth pop songs ever. If you were to put together a dark synth pop record like collection, Enola Gay would probably end up there. And so the first two records are really good. That sort of new wave pop stuff. And then Architecture and Morality is the third one. And it's still very poppy, but also getting a little strange. But it's funny that not only that you picked this record, but that Sean had it. Because as far as I can tell, this record is the only one that's like this. So it's like punky and it's super experimental. Uses a lot of, like you said, field recordings and samples, vocal samples, which at the time wasn't something that pop new wave did. Industrial music did that for sure, but not really, because this is 1983. So even what we know as industrial was still sort of in its infancy. So this is really Kraftwerk-ish. And I'm sure that Sean told me this was good, and I probably was like, no, I'm sure it's not. Because the record after this, Junk Culture, and then Crush, the record 2 records after this, are just straight pop. And eventually they get to the point where it's just like, there's nothing experimental anymore, and it's barely even new wave. It's just pop music. And so I thought this was really cool, because if you would have told me, hey, I'm really into this OMD record, I'd be like, really? That's weird, But I'm glad you picked this, because this record is really cool and super experimental and not what I expected at all. So I'm really glad that you picked it. I was talking to one of my friends yesterday, Nick Beard. I don't know if you know Nick, probably.
No, does he have a beard?
Not anymore. No, he shaved it. But he was the drummer in the old Scratch Revival Singers, and he's in Land of Blood and Sunshine now.
Sure, I've met him before. Yeah, I know. I mean, I don't really know him, but now that you mention it, I mean, I've met him a couple of times.
But we were just talking about something, and he said, yeah, I've really been into Dazzle ships lately. And I was like, what? Like the OMD record? And he was like, no, like Dazzle ships are ships that they painted in this weird way so that you can't tell if they're coming or going or which direction they're going. but he also likes OMD a lot. And he was like, but that's where they got the cover art from. So that weird sort of geometric design on the record, Dazzle Ships, is actually based on this concept of dazzle ships, which are battleships that they painted in disorienting ways. So I thought that was pretty cool that just randomly came up. So
yeah, that's a synchronicity.
Yeah, but I would say, honestly, even if you think you know what OMD does, give this record a listen, because it's not what you expect. So,
and if you don't want to, watch The Breakfast Club. I'm sure one of their songs will show up.
Yeah.
So, yeah, very, very cool record. Yeah. All right, what you got for me,
I guess
Eric?
I'll start with Klaatu.
Oh, yes.
So
yes.
Klaatu or Klaatu, I'll say Klaatu. Okay, here's the thing. Klaatu are not the Beatles. The reason I say that is the first Klaatu record came out and they didn't include any photographs, and they used like fake names and stuff. And people really thought that it might be the Beatles because the album is so cool and so strange and weird. That there was a real media kind of fervor about whether or not Klaatu was the Beatles. That first record is awesome. There's a song on it. What's it called? The Calling Occupants of Interplanetary Craft is what it's called.
Now, this is on their first record?
And that was actually covered by the Carpenters, which is sick.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, the first record
that
I
is
think
very
is just
sick.
called Klaatu. I guess they technically call it 3:47 Eastern Standard Time. So anyway,
yeah.
It's amazing. So I thought, well, I love that record, so I'll try this new one. It's called Hope. It's the second one. It's pretty good. I wouldn't say it's as I don't know how to explain the first one. It has this very Muppety feel to it. Like literally some of the vocals sound like Rolf the dog. Like, and so that element is sort of minimized a little bit. But it still continues on this record, Hope. It's really goofy. Like there are moments that are just like really, I don't have another word for it, but lame. They really are. And I'll just freely admit that when you're listening to it, you're going to be like, this is lame every once in a while, but it's also really fun, really well done. I would say if you like things like the Beatles, you're going to like it. But especially if you like things like Of Montreal or even some of the Elephant Six stuff, I think Elephant Six stuff borrowed heavily from this. If you like quaint little English seeming stories about weird characters, you know, like Penny Lane, if that's your deal, then you will really like this. And a lot of the guitar tones are really fun, really fuzzed out at times, almost like Ween, like a phaser and fuzz on guitars. It's just like unlistenable. But yeah, I would say if you like Ween or the Beatles or Electric Light Orchestra, if you like prog stuff, like, I don't even know, Mountain and things like that, Uriah Heep, maybe even a little, you'd probably like this. But I think it's a lot of fun, even if it's a little goofy at times. So yeah, what'd you think, Dan?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Actually, I really love this record. It's funny you mentioned the Beatles. Mm-hmm. So there was actually a conspiracy that they were the Beatles.
Yeah, there was.
So that's absolutely fantastic, because the first thing that I thought of the first track right away sounds like a Beatles
for
song.
Sure.
Like it sounds like the Beatles. So it starts off like a Beatles record. Then it goes into this like weird, like proggy sort of like stuff, which reminded me actually a lot of, you mentioned, stuff like Uriah Heep and sort of like prog. It had a very King Crimson feel for me.
Yep.
And then there was like this one song, I can't remember what it was called, but I thought it was fantastic. It was a 9-minute like Broadway musical or something. Like is what it sounded like. It was
it's
just
called Around the Universe
insane.
in 80 Days. Yeah.
Yeah, around the universe.
Or no,
in 80
Long
days.
Live
Absolutely.
Polizania. That's the
That's
9-minute
it. That's
one.
it.
Yeah.
Long live yeah, 9 minutes, and it's just like there's so many, like it doesn't even sound like a
No.
song. You know, it's just
yeah.
it's like just a bunch of like weird, but that Ween the Ween comparison, I definitely hear like a lot of like maybe like in the mollusk
Yeah.
or white
Definitely
pepper and
in the
stuff like
mollusk,
that,
but even other things too, like Captain Fantasy and things.
yeah, like weird stuff like that. But there's one other band that came
Okay.
to mind for some reason that is a modern band that I feel probably heard this record too, and that is the Flaming Lips.
Absolutely, for sure.
Especially on like records like the Soft Bulletin, but also At War with the Mystics.
for sure.
There's a lot of that kind of feeling that I'm getting from this. I thought it was a fantastic record. After you explained the first record to me, I got to go back and listen to that.
It's really fun. The first one's really fun.
This was just a really, really fun listen. I mean, I got a lot of enjoyment. And I was actually reading some comics while I was listening to it, and this is like the perfect record to do that.
Awesome. Cool.
It's just
glad you liked
it's
it.
really colorful. I really, really enjoyed it. So okay, so I'm going to move on to something that is really this is just a wild record to me. And I discovered this on an episode of Amoeba, What's in My Bag. I don't remember even what artist was shopping for records at the Amoeba store, but they picked this up and they played like a little 5-second clip of it. And I was like, I got to listen to this. And this is a record from a composer named Michael Gordon. And the name of the record is Trance. And it is just absolutely bonkers. Because it's not even... It sounds basically like 7 variations of the same track, which I think it basically is in a way. And it's really like it doesn't even sound there comes a point where it doesn't even sound like music anymore, because it's like it starts off with like a bass line that kind of is punky, and then there's all these like weird like violins and noises that come in, and guitars screeching and all kinds of stuff, and it basically just keeps building up and building up all these layers with each track. And each track is like, there's like 7 tracks. Each track is like at least 8 minutes long. And it's just really wild. And I couldn't find a lot of information on this album. I tried to look, to the best source of anything on the internet, Wikipedia. And there is a Wikipedia page for Michael Gordon, but there was no information on this record other than the title. So I don't know what the significance of this album. I don't even know any other Michael Gordon stuff, but I guess that the only thing that I found was that the record came to him in a dream, basically, which the record is called Trance, and it almost sounds like the purpose of it is to put the listener in a trance. I can't even really explain what this record is. It's just, but I find it really fascinating. It's not something that I would listen to all the time, by any means, but I think that it's just got this like almost like punk approach to composition in a way, but it's like also clearly somebody who's done other things. It's not, like that description doesn't really do it justice. But it's got some wild sounds. I do believe that it was actually written, like the composition Trance itself was written for some sort of movie or something. I'm not really sure, but Anyway, what'd you think of this, Eric?
Yeah, I thought it was really good. It's funny because for this week's episode, or I guess it would have been a couple weeks ago now, I was going to start to introduce a little bit of the avant-garde experimental kind of composition stuff that I listen to, but I was afraid I was going to alienate listeners. And I even told my wife, Sarah, about it. I was like, yeah, I kind of really want to do this or that, but I think we should keep it a little more kind of rock oriented, or at least founded in that sort of idea. And then I came downstairs and I looked at your choices and I started this record, and I went back upstairs and I said, Dan just picked an avant-garde experimental record. I'm like, what the hell, man? So it was kind of funny, but no, I really liked it. I liked the different styles, and I liked the different sounds used. I liked how there is the core movement, and it has this core theme, which is fairly dissonant, but you almost it almost becomes comforting to return to that theme, even though it is a little dissonant. It feels like it kind of ebbs and flows throughout the whole record. Things will build, kind of fall apart. We'll come back to that theme. So it is sort of a variations on a theme sort of idea, but it's not really like he's re-recording the same thing however many times. It's more like this theme just keeps bubbling up, or actually kind of boiling down out of all the chaos. But I thought it was really good. And one thing that this might be a little like esoteric or heady to look at it this way, but one thing I really liked was, I wouldn't say I liked how the artwork was presented on the cover. Like, it's not really my favorite kind of execution, but I really liked the subject, and it's basically just a grasshopper. But it brought to mind while I was listening the idea of how grasshoppers enter a swarming phase and become locusts. Like, that's how it works. Like, in Iowa, everyone thinks that locusts are just cicadas, but that's inaccurate. Locusts are actually grasshoppers who have changed because they've entered a swarming phase. Grasshoppers are generally kind of like isolated insects. They don't really interact that much until they enter the swarming phase. And I think that you kind of get that sense from this record. Like, if you think about that while you're listening, it really does sound like how you would imagine a swarm coming together would sound and feel. And I think that for me, that kind of changed the whole listen, because I had that in my head the whole time. And so it was like, yeah, to me, it sounded like that, how I would try to explain to someone how a swarming phase works and what a swarm of locusts becomes, how it becomes essentially a unit and of chaos. And I thought the record cover worked for that. I don't know if it was intentional, but it definitely enhanced my listen to think of it that way. So yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Wow.
So
yeah. Wow. Yeah. That's really cool. I definitely never gave that any thought, for sure.
I think a lot about insects.
But the cover, yeah, like, now that you mention it, there is a certain like element of like connectivity to like the sound of the compositions going on there. I like how everything just sort of builds up with all these layers. It's just like, it almost, the way that I would describe the way the songs sound is, it almost sounds like some guy just kind of, or a group of people, whatever, sitting in like a studio, like just sort of like spontaneously, let's add this on top of this. Let's add this on top of this.
Yeah.
it just kind of, everything just sort of builds up until it comes to a climax, which is like the end of one track, and then starts over again with like a skeletal version of like the next track.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, it's just really like it almost sounds like they're building the song in like real time or something. You know?
And I don't know.
They're building the track in real time.
I haven't been able to find credits for this. And so I don't know if this was played live. I don't know if this was notated and played by a group together, or if Michael Gordon pieced all this together in a studio. I really don't know.
Well, if you look at the Spotify, it looks like there's a bunch of people that like this is awesome. It's a Michael Gordon record, but it does look like there's a group of people that were involved in it somehow.
Okay. Cool.
Now, whether or not that's like an orchestra playing the stuff or whatever it is, I'm not really sure. That's another thing I really like about this is it's just a really mysterious sort of record. Like there's like no information about it. I kind of like that about it, you know?
Yeah.
I like the fact that I can't really confirm anything about it, you know?
Yeah.
Cause you know, that sort of aura of mystery is why I liked Tool in the early days.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Things like that. But so, yeah, no, I thought this was a really cool, and one of the reasons why I decided to pick it was because I was like, I wonder if Erik heard
this.
But
I've not heard of this composer even at all.
And then I was like, if he hadn't, I wonder what he's going to think. There was definitely that element of it, Erik, where I was like, I wonder what Erik is going to think of this if he hasn't heard it.
Yeah, no,
you know, because you're into a lot of wild stuff, man. You've introduced me to a lot of wild stuff.
It's right up my alley. I'll say that for sure.
That's kind of what I figured.
I'll continue to kind of pepper those records as we do this show, you know, because there is a lot of stuff that I think fans of, you know, various things, including Ween and Mr. Bungle and other things like that we talk about pretty often. Those things weren't born in a vacuum. I mean, they borrow from a lot of people.
Absolutely not.
And so, yeah, I think that I could share some things that you definitely would be like, oh, that's where they got that. So, you know.
Oh, absolutely. Well, like Ween, for instance. I mean, it's amazing when you listen to like I don't know, what's that song off of the Mollusk? Have you ever seen a whale with a polka dot tail?
Yeah.
That song sounds like a Resonance.
Oh, for sure.
It's like, and clearly Ween were influenced by the Resonance. They actually, I mean, Gene Ween actually was on that Resonance documentary.
Oh, I love that documentary.
It's a great documentary. I need to watch it again, but I remember Gene Ween was like, yeah, somebody told me that the Residents were like, you know, Mick Jagger, or something like that. Not Mick Jagger. I mean, but you know, like there were rumors for the longest time that the Residents were like famous musicians.
Yeah.
Don't you wish that were true?
I wish I didn't know. I am still furious at Hardy Fox for spilling the beans, but
I keep forgetting that the Residents are not anonymous.
Well, at least Hardy Fox, and we pretty much know the other ones too. But yeah, that's all right. Somebody will make music and stay anonymous forever and not spill the beans. So
exactly. All right. So
I guess my second one would be a group called JJ, and the record is called V. And you have to get those in the right order, otherwise you say vajayjay, and then people laugh. No,
I never put that together.
That's the only lightness that's going to happen in this review, by the way. So they're Swedish. The members are Joakim Bennen and Ellen Castlander.
I thought you were going to say Ellen DeGeneres.
I'm sure I screwed those names up. But yeah, they have other records that I've never really listened to. This one I've heard a number of times. I I would say that it falls into kind of the same stuff I always listen to, which is, I guess technically the genre is called escape room, but it has those drippy synths and things like that. But it also has a lot of orchestral elements to it, kind of classical elements. It also has a lot of trip hop to it. You know, a lot of like, I guess, I mean, you know what trip hop is: Massive Attack, Portishead,
yes.
Tricky, things like that. So it has elements of that too. It also has a pretty heavy hip hop element at times too. A lot of really lush strings, heavy beats, very melancholy in general, but also I think that it really goes a lot of places you don't expect it to, and it happens upon some really pretty moments that you probably don't expect to happen either. Like almost to the point that it could surprise you. Like I remember the first time listening to this, I think I audibly gasped at least once at decisions they had made and things that happened within the songs. And so I think if you're in a mellow mood, but you also want to be challenged a little bit, I think it's a pretty cool record. It's definitely got its own atmosphere, and when you listen to it, you're in it. So yeah, that's about all I got to say about that, I guess. What'd you think, Dan?
Well, it's parts of it are stuff that I would say is not really, I guess, in my, as they say, in my wheelhouse. I listen. I mean, I appreciate this kind of stuff. You know, I really enjoyed. There were like 3 or 4 songs that really blew me away, particularly the last track, called "Always Always," with the guitar and the vocals. That just blew me away. I was like, this is one of the most gorgeous things I've ever heard in my life. I mean, it just unbelievable. And there were at least another couple of songs that definitely just blew my mind for sure. There was that really hip hop influenced one. You mentioned the hip hop one.
Yeah.
Inner Light, that was it. Inner Light. That one was really good. The first couple of tracks on it were really, really good. It's one of those records. I listened to this twice. It's one of those records that I think for me, I would have to give it multiple listens before it would maybe like, you know, before I would not get, I guess, as the record went on, I have to admit, I kind of got bored with it in parts. It kind of just, you know, like towards the middle. But I stuck it out and listened to like, you know, the whole thing. And I found the second half of the album a lot more interesting than the first half for some reason. I'm not sure why that is exactly, other than it sounds to me like towards the second half of the record, they started to kind of branch out from like this. The first half just like kind of sounded straight, like I guess what you would call, you said it's like escape room,
whatever that
or something
is.
like that. So like I would call it almost like dark pop or something like that. Like, I guess you know, cause I could never really figure out, like atmospheric dark pop kind of is how I would like almost describe it, you know? And I just kind of felt that like it wasn't bad. Like I don't think it was bad at all. It just, I noticed that like the first half of the record really started to kind of get a little samey for me anyway. But then like they started to branch out and do other things. Like all of a sudden there's that hip hop track where like you hear like some guy, like it sounds like they're in the club all of a sudden. It's like, what the hell? Where did this come from? And then like I said, that last track was so minimalist, and it sounded almost like a replacement song or something, you know, like It just kind of, again, like I like the parts of the record that sound like they just came out of nowhere. You know? Not that I think that it's a bad record or I thought it was a very interesting listen, especially like the production on it is just absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah.
But it's probably not something that you would find me listening to a lot.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's something that I would probably have to spend a little bit more time with. And I could see something like this really growing on me, though. Like after a few listens.
Yeah, it's interesting stuff. And how I got into it is through listening to Young Lean. Apparently in Sweden, and I'm not even going to pretend to be like an expert on this or anything, but there's this it's a style of music. And like the other big groups are the Tough Alliance and
I like that name.
The Honey Drips or something like that.
Oh yes, I've heard the Honey Drips.
It's somehow like super hooligan, crime-oriented drug music that's based in sort of like being really out of it on Xanax, but also being like a thug, but also making like pop music. Like it's a really confusing thing that I seriously don't know very much about at all. But that's how I found it in the first place. So I probably will keep listening to more and more groups from that sort of like scene because everything I've listened to so far checks a lot of boxes for me. But it definitely, like you said, and the only reason I mention all that is because I really think that, with most music scenes, there's an element of drugs to it and specific drugs for different scenes and things. Like house music doesn't really exist without ecstasy. You know what I mean? So, but I think that that's part of it. And so I think the really getting bored with it element, I think might honestly be part of the appeal, because I feel the same way. Halfway through the record, I was still surprised by the production and some of the choices they were making, but also very much like, wow, they're just living here. Like they're not really concerned with making this interesting for me right now, And so I'm obviously not selling it by saying that, but I don't know.
You could be onto something there, because there really is an element like how you described that is basically what hip hop is right now, mainstream hip hop. It's all about drugs. It's all about like, there's rapping, but there's also singing. There's also like, weird sort of like atmospheric production in a lot of it. And I feel like that influence has, seeped into like the American hip hop scene.
Absolutely.
Right now,
Yep.
Because there's a lot of that, like Young Lean. You mentioned Young. Is he
I
from
think
Sweden?
So. Yeah.
Young Lean. Like Young Lean. I mean that sounds. There's so many rappers out today like that just have that sound, and that it sounds like they're influenced by that.
I think that it's spread to other areas now for sure. So
yeah, absolutely. There's this kid named Rat Boy that I've been listening to, and he is actually signed to Hellcat Records, which is Tim Armstrong from Rancid's label. And he like is kind of like this combination of like hip hop ska. Like he sounds like the Clash meets like, you remember the Streets from way back when? I
listened to the Streets.
Or like I don't know. Like imagine if the Clash, like merged with like some like strange indie rock. Like punk stuff and I guess Clash are punk, but like mixed with like really British like hip hop, Like, it's really, really interesting stuff. And so my point is though, is that I've noticed that in hip hop, in modern hip hop, there's a lot of like, sort of like cross pollination in genres going on. Like there seems to be, like, if you notice, a lot of rappers are turning rock now, you know, like a lot of the newer ones anyway. Like, and a lot of them are saying things like, even somebody like Post Malone, you know, is like, well, I didn't really want to do rap, but rap is the easiest way to make money right now. But I can play like Nirvana songs really well.
For sure.
You know, stuff like that, you know, and there seems to be a lot of that going on now where like a lot of these rappers are now kind of coming out of their shell and doing like this sort of like weird rock rap combination that's not Limp Bizkit,
sure. Yep.
you know?
Yeah.
It's really interesting.
Definitely.
But
Cool.
okay, so my
Speaking
third
of hip-hop.
pick. Speaking of hip hop, exactly. This is a really, really big one, folks, because this came out this year in 2021. This came out last month. And it's Madlib Sound Ancestors. Madlib, of course, the producer who is also goes by Quasimoto. And I've voiced several times on this my appreciation for Madlib as a producer and as a rapper. And of course, he was the man behind the Mad Villain collaboration with MF Doom, as well as many other. Madlib has done so much stuff for underground hip hop. He's even produced for Kanye West, which is weird. But Sound Ancestors is like his latest record, instrumental. I don't even want to really just call it just an instrumental hip hop record, because I feel like it's more than just that. This record, just the minute I heard it, I knew I was going to pick it, because I was like, I never thought that I would pick a record that came out in 2021, but my God, this is just unbelievable to me. So many different like explorations and sound, and so many. I mean, Madlib has always been kind of a wizard behind. He's a magician as far as like just making music. I mean, there's so many things going on here, but at the same time, it's like, I wouldn't call it like experimental necessarily. I do think there are moments of experimentation on it, but it's just so good. It's one of those, and I don't listen to instrumental hip hop. Like, instrumental hip hop is just not my thing. Like, I like to hear lyricism. I like to hear rapping. You know what I mean? I like to hear the voice. There have been a few, like DJ Shadow or whatever, or J Dilla and Madlib. Pretty much those are the ones that I'll listen to the instrumental side of things, because I feel like one of the things that really makes Madlib stand out from other producers is that a lot of times I feel like with a hip hop producer, it's just kind of like, okay, here's a beat for you to rap over. And that's the only thing. With Madlib, you can really tell that he really puts a lot of focus in like the music, the sound, the music. No matter who he's producing for, the music is just as important of a part of the song as the rapper. And there's a lot of artists that I feel in hip hop that have successfully done that, but not enough. For me, it's usually just like, again, like, let's just throw on a beat and let's just have this guy rap over it. You know what I mean? And it's a sick beat. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like the Beastie Boys was a great example of somebody who, like, the music is just as, like, if you took all of the Beastie Boys off of, like, I don't know, like a song like Pass the Mic or something. If that was just an instrumental track, it would be just as interesting without them rapping over it.
For sure.
You know what I mean? Madlib is a master at that. I mean, every beat that he's ever made, in my opinion, is like, if you took the rap, and he's produced for some really great rappers, really great MCs. If you took the MCs off of those tracks, I would still listen to it because the beat, the music to that is so wild. It's so good. And that's probably why he might actually be my favorite. He's at least in my top 3 of favorite hip hop producers for sure. But there's so much stuff on here. I mean, there's like there's some like salsa influence going on with some of these tracks. The title track, Sound Ancestors, it's so fitting because it just sounds like he's paying tribute to like a lot of just jazz greats, which I'm sure that's probably exactly what he had in mind, because Madlib actually taught himself basically jazz, how to play like jazz music, which is unbelievable. Yeah, I mean, to me, this record is just an exploration in the genius of the sound of Madlib.
Yeah.
You know, I love it. And it's already one of my favorite records of the year.
For sure.
What did you think, Erik?
My first note that I had for this said, this is designed to be listened to, not to be rapped over. So I 100% agree with what you said. At first I didn't know exactly what was going on. I thought it was good. By the time it got to the song Loose Goose, I was all in. Like, that track just blew it wide open for me. It's really cool. I love how non-hip hop it is, if that makes any sense. It doesn't seem to be...
absolutely.
It's not that it's not hip hop. It's just that it doesn't seem preoccupied with being hip hop. It's just music, and it's created from samples. And I think that's really cool when people do that, when it's not just a beat and it's not just, a cool cut from some obscure record. Like, he's really crafting music, fully formed musical ideas here. The samples are from all kinds of sources and cultures, very jazzy overall, like you said. I will say there was one thing that bothered me about this record, though, is that I couldn't place a single sample on this thing, and I thought that was really cool. But on the song Dirt Knock, he uses a sample from a song called Searching for Mr. Right by Young Marble Giants. And Young Marble Giants is one of my favorite things that has ever happened. If you haven't listened to that record, it's just killer. And so out of nowhere and so original. And I just love Young Marble Giants. And it felt like he used a little too much of that sample. It almost became a remix in a sense. Like, I know that sounds nitpicky or whatever, but the way I thought about it, it was like if you found like a hair in your sausage. Like, you don't want to know what your sausage is made of. Like, it's like you don't want to hear like basically an entire song sampled, unless that's the point and it's a remix or whatever. And so that was the only thing, but it was still really cool that he sampled it, because I mean, I love it. So as soon as it started, I had that moment of, oh my God, he's using Young Marble Giants. Like, that's outrageous, so it was cool. But yeah, the rest of it, the samples, I couldn't place a single note. And it's not like I'm some sample hound and I just know everything. I'm not trying to act like that. But generally, I do hear a couple things and I'm like, oh, I know that. And I get to research it and figure it out and remember what it was. And with this, it's like, these are some deep cut samples. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's part of Madlib's appeal, is that there's just so much stuff that you can tell he's a total just crate
for
digger,
sure.
I mean, it's just Unbelievable. Young Marble Giants. One interesting thing you bring that up. I did not realize that Hole covered the song Credit.
Right, and I didn't even know they covered it until maybe half a year ago. My friend Amanda posted the Hole cover on Facebook or something. And I was like, what the hell is this? When did Hole cover Young Marble Giants? And of course she was like, who the hell are Young Marble Giants?
Yeah, well, it's on the album Live Through This. And I've had that, well, I don't have it anymore, but I had that album for probably 15 years.
What song is it? Credit in the
really
Straight
like
World?
that.
Is that what it
Credit in the Straight World. I had no idea that was a Young Marble Giants cover.
Yeah, they're amazing. Yeah.
I always thought it was.
Well, they did a really nice arrangement of it. Since hearing it, it's like
they really did.
I can hear how they were true to the original, but also turned it into their own thing. And it I really like it as a cover. I think they did a nice job.
I don't care. I know that a lot of people like to give Hole a lot of shit or whatever, but I still love that record and the first Hole record.
Yeah,
too.
I've only heard them a few times, but I like them when I've heard them.
I don't listen. I don't listen to a lot of it. I mean, the whole theory is that Kurt Cobain wrote "Live Through This," and then Billy Corgan wrote "Celebrity Skin."
Wow. So
Courtney Love can't write anything.
Well.
That's the conspiracy theory. The people that hate Courtney Love will say that, and there's a lot of people that seem to hate Courtney.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Well, I guess it's good she got kicked out of Faith No More then, because.
Yeah, absolutely. Could you imagine if she said?
Well, can you imagine how much they hated Chuck Mosley? I love Chuck Mosley.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Me too. Those first two Chuck Mosley Faith No More records are freaking amazing. And in fact, in some ways, I definitely like the real thing more than the two, but I almost like Introduce Yourself as much or more than the
thing is, if I agree. I like them as much. And that's only because honestly, if it were two different bands, I would love both of them. Like, I don't even feel like I have to make a decision, even though a lot of the sounds in We Care a Lot and Introduce Yourself are there in the real thing. I mean, they remain because it is the same group of people playing. There's a lot going on that's different too, though,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, I kind of think that the real thing was sort of a continuation.
Yeah, I'm sure it was written
Mosley
for Chuck Mosley to sing too.
Right. And then, but you also got to think too that it's crazy to think that Mike Patton was only 18 years old when he got offered to sing for Faith No More.
They already had it done.
Epic.
That record was done.
They had the record done. He had 2 weeks to write the lyrics, and Epic became this huge hit when he was like 18 or 19 years old. And then Warner Brothers decides to sign his other band because he's Mike Patton of Faith No More.
Oh,
that
yeah,
is hilarious.
for sure. But honestly, if I had to make a short list of songs that can always pull me out of a funk, Annie's song on Introduce Yourself is probably number one. It's pretty much that and that Tom Tom Club song. Those are the two most get me out of a funk songs out there.
I still think that We Care a Lot is just a ridiculous. It's a ridiculous song, man. I love.
Oh my god,
his voice. Voice. Chuck Mosley's voice sounds like a combination of I don't know, like Keanu Reeves in Bill and Ted, and something like I don't know, Robert Smith or something, or he has a new wave,
a little bit of that
feel to it.
And I'm not totally convinced that Patton wasn't sort of emulating Chuck Mosley a little bit on the real thing.
No, I actually think that that was probably part of his. I mean, I'm sure that it's just like Bruce Dickinson with Paul Di'Anno and Iron Maiden, you know that Bruce Dickinson was like studying Paul Di'Anno. Like, you know what I mean? Even though obviously Bruce Dickinson, I mean, who has the better voice in
same
terms
thing with
of
Patton. I mean,
range and operatic. Same thing with Patton, But Paul Di'Anno, there's no question that Paul Di'Anno fit Iron Maiden
for
too.
Sure.
You know, and so did, or at least those first two records. Same with Faith No More. There's no way that Mike Patton could do We Care a Lot and Introduce Yourself.
Yeah, I think
even
so too.
though, because there are people that say that about Dickinson. Oh, could you imagine if he sang on Killers?
Yeah.
No, I couldn't. No, I wouldn't want Bruce Dickinson to sing on Killers.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
That's a great comparison. Because
Paul Di'Anno,
similar stories.
Paul Di'Anno was the perfect guy for those first two Maiden records.
Yeah.
Just like Chuck Mosley was the perfect guy for
I
those
agree, because it put him in a
different
it put him in a different realm. Like, Real Thing is definitely funk metal. Like, there's just no doubt about it.
Right.
The first two records are, I wouldn't say they're funk metal. I would say they're something else. I don't know what exactly, but it's not, I don't think it's the same. It definitely got there. It's almost like skate punk pop or something. Like, I don't even know what it would be, you know?
It kind of existed in this weird sort of thing that was going on in LA at the time. Like the early Chili Peppers, you know, like, and like Infectious Grooves and things like that. Like, you know, it's Fishbone, like early Fishbone, stuff like that.
But I love Chuck
weird,
Mosley, and I'll argue that forever. I'm not going to say he's better than Patton. I'm not even going to compare the two because it doesn't really matter.
Well, I mean, come on, man. Like, you can't. I mean, that's apples and oranges.
But everyone hating Chuck Mosley because they love Patton, I don't think that's necessary. They're not, you know.
And unfortunately, I kind of had a little bit of that, like, for a little while, you know, because when you're 16, like, King for a Day sounds like the raddest thing, you know, which
good.
it is.
Yeah.
King for a Day is an amazing record, but like, so then I'm like, well, what's this
for sure.
Introduce Yourself stuff? But then when I got older, it's like, man, like, dude, these Chuck Mosley records are, and also just the band, the skill level was already there.
Yeah.
I mean, it was amazing.
That was a good side conversation there. Pretty much out of nowhere.
Well, from out of nowhere.
Good one.
The first track on The Real Thing.
Good one.
Oh, man. Yeah, I got to say, man, The Real Thing still has some of my absolute favorite tracks from.
Yeah, I really love that record. I remember buying it, and I remember listening to the cassette and just not really knowing what I was hearing. And it was cool. It was really cool. Yeah, it's good stuff.
Definitely. All right. Your last pick, and I already know what it is, and I'm excited to talk about it.
So, we've already run fairly long, which is not a surprise, but I'm going to tell a short little story, and it's about Adam Ant. So my third choice is Kings of the Wild Frontier by Adam and the Ants. For the most part with this podcast, I've been trying to choose records that I'm not familiar yet with, you know? And I guess that's just sort of like, so it's fresh and I haven't thought about it a lot and already come to these preconceived notions and all this kind of stuff. This record, though, is actually one of my favorite records, probably, ever. I know that I'm super hyperbolic all the time, and everything is the funniest and the best and the coolest and my favorite and all that stuff. But for real, I really love this record. So here's the short version of this story that no one cares about but me, apparently, because the information's really hard to find. So there's a guy called Malcolm McLaren. He is the manager for the Sex Pistols. Adam Ant is in a band. I can't remember what their name was. It's not really that big of a deal what his old band was called. and he sees the Sex Pistols, totally changes what he wants to do. Puts out an album called Dirk Wears White Socks. And it's pretty good. It's kind of punky. It's kind of new wavy, whatever. And so, but it doesn't sell very well, and it doesn't really do all that well for Adam Ant. So Adam Ant hires Malcolm McLaren to be his manager. And Malcolm McLaren tells him, okay, here's what you need to do. You need to dress like Blackbeard the pirate, mix in some Native American dress, like paint your face like Geronimo. He gives him a cassette tape full of music, and says, basically, plunder this cassette that I've put together and steal everything from it that you can. And if you do those things, you're going to be a huge success. So Adam Ant does all these things. One of the tracks on there is called Burundi Black, and it's a kind of a disco remix of this field recording of the Burundi beat. And the Burundi is in Africa, and it's this field recording of these African drummers, okay? So, anyway, Adam and his group, the Ants, put all this stuff together, and they do start to become successful. They're getting ready to record their record with all this, newly written stuff. Malcolm McLaren then decides he's going to take Adam's band from him, and he starts a band called Bow Wow Wow. So, the Ants now have become Bow Wow Wow with a new singer, who are basically taking all the stuff they had just written with Adam Ant as the Ants, and that becomes Bow Wow Wow's sound. So now you have this race to get this sound out to the public. So Adam Ant hires a whole new band. They rearrange and rewrite and re-record all these songs using this drum beat, using Native American beats, using this imagery of the New Romantics mixed with like being a pirate and like westerns and stuff, like spaghetti westerns. Anyway, Adam and the Ants get the record out first, Kings of the Wild Frontier. Bow Wow Wow comes out with it, and they still have pretty good success, probably because they have, a 15-year-old girl as their singer who they apparently think it's okay to put naked on the cover of the albums. Anyway, that's a whole nother story.
Right.
I love Bow Wow Wow also, by the way, so whatever. So yeah, and that's why this album sounds like this. That's sort of why the record after this, Prince Charming, doesn't sound like this necessarily. And it's the story that no one really talks about, how this Burundi beat recording went from a field recording in Africa in 1964 to some guy, I can't remember, remixed it as a disco song essentially in the early 70s. That makes its way onto a cassette that Malcolm McLaren gives to Adam Ant, and then that's what we hear on this record. So I'm sorry that went a little long, but I just think it's outrageously interesting and totally insane that someone would put a band together, then steal the band, and then basically try to release the same music. With that being said, though, the album is amazing. The drumming is so cool. There's two drummers going all the time. And the Burundi beat is sort of like this, like that kind of beat. And it appears throughout the record. It's in, Dog Eat Dog, which is just a ridiculously cool song. Ant Music, Kings of the Wild Frontier, Killer in the Home. All these songs are amazing. There's a couple that are a little lame. I think that Los Rancheros is a little lame. The Magnificent Five is a little bit lame too. And those are just because they get a little too into the spaghetti western stuff. But for the most part, it's very primal drum rhythms, really sparse, twangy guitars, a really heavy bass presence, and Adam's voice sounds really cool. A lot of like weird chanty, like I said, sort of Native American chant vocals and things like that. There's a lot of cultural appropriation happening on here, and so that I could understand could be off-putting to people, but I don't think it was in a malicious way. I think it was really trying to find cool things to draw inspiration from. But I can't say enough about this record, and everyone, of course, is going to be like, oh, Goody Two Shoes, that's Adam Ant, and they probably wouldn't give this record a chance, but I would say you really should. And now I'm really out of breath. What'd you think, Dan?
Yeah, no, I thought this was a fantastic sort of melding of punk, glam, new wave, garage rock, and like you said, there's a lot of like Native American sort of influences going on as well. I felt like it was kind of it's one of those records that I would have not given the time of day unless you would have recommended it to me, Eric, because of Goody Two Shoes. You know what I mean? Like to me that song just sounded like novelty. So when I heard Adam and the Ants, I was kind of like, really? That's interesting. And then I listened to it and I'm like, oh, wait, actually this is really cool. It's like the best parts of David Bowie, T-Rex, you know, but totally has like, you know, his own thing kind of going on, you know? Yeah, I mean, I thought it was fantastic. It was a really, really enjoyable, fun listen. And I listened to it 3 times, and I'll probably listen to it again. I mean, it's such a really, really, it's just a really fun listen. And that what you mentioned about the cultural appropriation kind of going on, that's, I mean, this is an example. I agree with you. I don't think it was in a malicious way at all. And I think it's an example of exactly what you were saying, drawing inspiration from a bunch of different places, you know, kind of going on. And I enjoy that. Because I think that when what they say cultural appropriation, you know, it can be used in tasteful ways, you know, like to, you know, like you said, pull inspiration from a lot of different areas. I mean, we wouldn't have the Clash, you know, if something like that, you know, if that wasn't allowed to exist. We wouldn't have the Beastie Boys. We wouldn't have, you know what I mean? There's so many examples.
Right.
But then also like you were saying, you know, unfortunately there are malicious ways to appropriate culture, but you know, Adam and the Ants though. This is a really,
it's
really
really
cool
energetic
record.
too. It's like, again, if I guess maybe I was in a funk a couple weeks ago when we put this together because I kept trying to kind of find things that would get me out of that funk. And I knew for a fact that this would just inject energy straight into my body. I don't know if anyone could ever hear Kings of the Wild Frontier, the song, and not just have a visceral, energetic reaction to it. I can't imagine someone being like, yeah, I guess it's okay, like at all. So
no, it's pretty amazing, man.
Nice, cool,
pretty amazing. I was really, really into it for sure. It's definitely a record that I think I'll be revisiting.
Yeah, that's how it
worked
with me. Like someone told me, and I don't remember who, that I needed to check it out. And I heard it and I was like, oh, well, this is going to get played. This is now one of those records. It's like instant. Sometimes that happens. Like the first time I heard Moon Safari by Air, I was like, oh, I'm going to listen to this for the rest of my life. Like it's just, certain records, you hear it and you're like, yeah, okay, this is now part of the rotation.
Oh, speaking of which, there's a record that I've really gotten into that you recommended. This is I won't probably, well, I won't pick this as a pick in future episodes now, but I just want to talk about it real quick. The pulsars.
For sure.
I actually
it's a fun one. Definitely.
It is a fun record, and also I found it really interesting. I know that that's kind of a record that Gimpy kind of referred to as sort of like, hey, I really like sort of how this dude, there's a couple songs on there on that Pulsars record where I'm like, wow, like I kind of hear like, Eric's songwriting.
Yeah, they were like kindred spirits. I think when we first heard it, we were like, oh, wow, that's great. Someone else is doing this too,
Particularly there's that song called the Submission Song.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if you're familiar with it or, but that song, like, particularly just reminds me of something that you would have written for Gimpy.
For sure. Yeah.
Like, it's just, and then also there's that song about I discovered that other band, or the one band, the Silicone Teens.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah. That whole song was about the Silicone Teens. Right. It's called the Silicone Teens. And then I found out that it's like this weird, like, synth cover band, basically, that existed in the 80s.
Yeah. I've never heard that
stuff.
Full Silicone Teens. I think they had just one record. I don't know for sure, but yeah.
Yeah, they have one record, and to be honest with you, it's interesting, but I wouldn't call it
I think they had
super
a
great
single that did well, and I'm sure I've heard that.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, but I thought that was really interesting because I've heard about the Pulsars for years and never listened to them, and I just decided to give it a shot. I'm like, wow, these guys never came out with a second record, and that's disappointing. But yeah, what are you gonna
just
do?
enjoy the one, I guess.
Enjoy the one record that came out for sure. But that pretty much wraps up this episode. So everybody, you can listen to us on Spotify, on what are the other two? Oh, Transistor and Content Made Right, which of course we'll be sharing links to on our Instagrams. Also, if you want to just follow us or talk to us on Instagram, my name is Dan_the_ruler. Eric's
Old Man
you're still
Erie,
Old Man Erie,
word.
correct?
Yep.
And let us know what you think. Let us know if you love it, you hate it.
If you love, hate it.
Let us know if you love, hate it. I mean, you can do both.
I don't have enough frenemies in my life, so feel free to take that role. I just have friends and enemies. I'd really love to have some people that sort of hate me, some rivalries. Let's get those going, guys.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But I think that brings us to just a little bit over the hour and a half mark. So, folks, nope, we got there. And folks, we will see you next week.
All right,
y'all
bye.
have a good week. Bye.